Hello, welcome to KennyRoy.com. I'm Kenny Roy. This is the Ask Videomail for June 15th, 2015. Welcome to the site, you new members, and welcome back to the old members. The Ask Videomail is your chance to get your question in character, animation, or performance answered in a video just like this one, but I need your question if I'm going to answer it right. Yes, so please send it to webmaster@kennyroy.com. I go through all the questions and I answer the ones that I think will help the most people. There's no such thing as a stupid question, and it is the best way to get the most out of the site. It is an exciting week, E3 this week. I'm going to be heading out, checking out all the awesome games that are coming up, and working on my own games. What the hell is that about? Glad you asked. If you don't know, go ahead and follow me on Facebook, Twitter, and you will see links frequently. Advertising the Twitch stream. We stream every single day from the studio now. So if you want to get some animation goodness and hang out, chat, get a lot more time to just do fun things, then come check us out on the stream, twitch.tv/Arconyx, ARCONYX, twitch.tv/Arconyx. Anyway, good question this week. This one's actually been sitting probably the longest in my entire question queue. But I decided to answer it this week. I don't know why. Maybe I'm feeling a little reflective, a little self-reflective. Check it out. Well, that's it. There is the question. I have the story that is written out in all of the blurbs whenever, in the back, the back cover of How to Cheat in Maya, and whenever I do like conferences and stuff, which is Kenny Roy got his start as a dustbuster in '97, and from there went on to animate most memorable characters on screen, anyway. But truthfully, the real start, it's not as glamorous as that. Well, I mean, what I think this question is really asking is how did my experience differ from what is possible today, and it does differ. And if that wasn't the question, then that's the answer. My start differs greatly from what I think is even possible today. But what I try to do is I try to give people the leg up that maybe is still possible, and hopefully you can take what I'm telling you guys in these videos and run with it. But to make a long story short, I got my start still back. '97. That was only 2 years after Jurassic Park, and I was a digital artist working on films. And then, really, there was nothing really fancy about being a digital artist then. What a dustbuster was a person that went through frame by frame of a film that had been scanned, because they didn't have digital cameras back then, the digital film cameras. They didn't have that yet. That hadn't been invented. So you went frame by frame through the scanned 35 millimeter film, and every once in a while there would be a dust or a scratch or something on the film that would get scanned, because you would bring in that digital file, or that film into a digital file. And so my job was to just frame through a film, and whenever there was dust or scratches or whatever, I would use something called Amazon Paint, which was a program that had 4 tools. It had a clone brush, it had a color brush, it had smudge and erase. That was it. And you could frame forward and you could frame back, but you couldn't compare frames. And you also couldn't, not only could you not compare frames, but you could only go 1 frame forward and 1 frame back. So if you were trying to figure out what was supposed to be somewhere, if there was a big dust or scratch or something like that, and there was something behind it that maybe there was moving. So for instance, you had a really fast moving scene and a lot of parallax. On one frame you had a scratch and there was something in the background, and then the frame before it, they're walking along a fence or something and there's a fence post covering it, and then the frame before that there's a different fence post covering it. You might have to go 4 frames back to where you can see what was actually supposed to be there. and then you only had a clone brush that worked on the frame that you were working on. So if there was, let's say it was a building way far in the background and a scratch through it and they're walking in front of a fence, like there was no way for you to actually like fix the building because there was nothing to clone from. So you actually had to paint the building back in by going frame, looking at it, and then going frame, and then sort of like filling it in, frame, and just going back and forth. So at any rate, so the first project I worked on was this animation called Marco Polo Return to Xanadu, and it's on IMDb, and you can check it out. I'm not credited. But my job was a dustbuster on that film, and the film was in horrible shape. And so I was already, of course, very interested in animation. When I was a little kid, my older brother's friend brought over like VHSs of like anime and like these really awesome animations that I really loved. And that was right around the time of, right in the very beginning. It was right around the time of like where there would be film festival. They would release like VHSs of all the film festival like CG animations. And so before like Toy Story, I still had piles of VHSs that had like chrome unicorns galloping on checkerboards and stuff like that, and all those things. So I was just so interested in CG and 3D, and I thought it was amazing. Anyway, so but I didn't really understand everything about animation or the principles of animation because I didn't go that route. I sort of entered animation through the technical and the interest in CG side, and then for months and months and months on end, it actually took about 2.5 months to dust bust the entire film. But what happened was I framed through an entire feature film, one frame at a time, and normally forward and back and forward and back and forward and back and forward back, because this film was in horrible shape. There was a scratch or dust on every frame. And not only that, sometimes there was like rips like through the entire like piece of the film missing. And so what I'd have to do is there'd be one thing where like a person like raw like that, and their arm would be missing. And so what would I have to do? I'd actually have to frame forward and then frame back. So forward and then back, and then forward and then back, forward, back, and sort of I realized that it was right here and then it was right here that I had to basically draw. I had to tween this, this arm, because there was a rip like through the frame where it was missing. And so I almost like had the job of a tweener as well as doing this like digital cleanup. So at any rate, you'd be surprised how much you learn about animation when your first job is to actually tween 3 or 4 frames from every single scene of an animated film. It was trial by fire, and I fell in love with it, because what I noticed was I could do things that actually made it kind of, in my opinion, better at that point. So with that on my with that in my past, I went on to that was around the end of high school. And so my senior year of high school, I was in the film class, and we had to have in the film 5, there was 5 levels of film at my school. It was a really good school. We had to have a thesis film, and normally we were still shooting on Super 8, so like film, like tiny little film, but you got actually 16 mil for your thesis. And I told my teacher I wanted to do an animation instead. And so I did an animation, and my teacher, bless her heart, she didn't know anything about animation, and she said, like, listen, this can't be like a cartoon. Like, you actually have to make like a real film. It has to have a story and whatever. So I guess, she, around that time, I mean, again, this was just after Jurassic Park. So, what a high school student could actually accomplish, like no one really knew, and I didn't even really know. So my senior year, I didn't go on the class trip. I didn't do anything for. I didn't go anywhere on vacation. When it was school breaks, like Christmas vacation and spring break and whatever, all my friends, they went off and had fun and had adventures. I would take my father had a very powerful computer at his office because he was an editor, and so I took my father's computer and I brought it up to my room. I brought it home from his office up to my room, and I literally, and I'm not kidding, because I had a, this thing about being disturbed back then, but I literally locked myself in my room for weeks on end, and I would bring like a gigantic dog bowl full of Wheaties or Lucky Charms, whatever was available, and I would just like eat that for breakfast and lunch, and then maybe come down for dinner. But I would lock myself in my room for weeks working on this film. Anyway, so I finished that and I submitted it to this art. This art is not really a competition as much as it is. Well, you do compete, but it was sort of like a recognition, like this body called the NFA. And the NFA is a organization that is the only body that recommends students to something called the Presidential Scholars Program, and that's President of the United States. So I actually got a first level award from NFA, and then I did the academic application, and I actually got a Presidential Scholars Award. And with that in hand, I actually could get a full ride anywhere, basically in the U.S. Problem was, I only applied to CalArts, and I got rejected. I thought my life was over. I'm like, everyone is telling me, because remember, this is still early, if you want to be an animator. See, when I was up at, all right, so I'll tell you this. So it turns out, serendipitously, and this is where you can say like, oh God, Kenny got lucky, and I hate him for it. It turns out that year was the last year that this one judge at the NFA, because you have a 3-year term as a judge at the NFA, volunteer basis. That was the last year that this man named Hale, who was the director of digital art at ILM, was a judge for the film category. I submitted in the film. There wasn't an animation category. Now there is, but I submitted in the film category. And he said, this is way more than people your age are doing. Yeah, I think you really ought to come to ILM and do the apprenticeship. So I said, okay. Turns out the apprenticeship was they were taking all of the best CalArts grads, and they were bringing them up to ILM and saying, if you can learn the computer, and back then that's what they used to call it, because it was a SGI machine. It was the IRIX operating system. It was like this big. It was loud and obnoxious. They were like $25,000 for like an Octane 2. So huge barrier to entry. So nobody was teaching themselves CG animation at home at that point. It was impossible to, because Maya, it was alias Maya, and Maya was something like $8,000 or $12,000 per year. So anyway, so they but actually they use Softimage up at ILM. But at any rate, so I go there, and what they were doing at that point was they're taking all of the best CalArts grads, the people who were like blowing people's socks off with the Big Show, and if you could learn the computer in 6 weeks, you basically had a job. So I was lumped in with them, even though I was just a high school graduate. I was lumped in with the CalArts grads, and I learned the computer, even though I knew everything there was to know about the computer. And I was showing. They hooked me up with a senior animator, actually the animation supervisor on Jurassic Park 3. So I was doing cycles, and I was actually working on pre-production for Men in Black 2. I didn't have to learn the computer at all. I just sat down and I got to work. So, but at any rate, so that was basically kind of like my huge break, and it was a really kind of big leap from where I had started to what I was where I ended up in a short time. But that is why I keep telling people that unpaid internships from a reputable company are far better than a paid internship from like a hole in the wall. Because what a hole in the wall is going to do is they're going to say you're a paid intern, and they're going to use that as an excuse to give you minimum wage and expect you to do basically junior animator or even like full animator work. All right? They say it's a trial period. They can use any euphemism they want. They can sort of gloss it over with BS, but really it's like slave labor. All right? So that's how I got my start, okay, was through the apprenticeship program at ILM. So in California, at least, there are very strict rules as to what you have to do with an intern. And if it's a big reputable company, they're going to adhere to those rules. And the biggest rule is that you have to be given as an intern, you have to be given more than you can possibly provide back. So it has to be a burden for the company to take on an intern. It can't be a help. It has to be a burden. So at any rate, so that's why I recommend that. But my story basically has to do with a overall an attitude of you pay now or you pay later. And I got that attitude basically from sports. When I also tried really hard in sports, and I did well. I was on 3 varsity teams in high school, and I took that very much to heart. When people were goofing around and they were just do 2 laps and the coach is not watching and they just do 1 or whatever, right when everyone starts slowing down, I would double the pace. I would go race pace and do the second one even stronger. And that was because I was like, you know what? I'm either going to, be tired as a dog tonight, or we're going to lose our game tomorrow. So which one do I actually want? Which one is more important to me? And so my entire, my start, even up until now, I've always said, pay now or pay later, and just take a second to think which one you want, because sometimes paying later is not, is fine too. Not very often. I'd rather get something done now and be set up to relax later. But so. I was kind of blessed to go to a really fantastic school that had a film program that fostered an interest in film and creativity in me. I was certainly lucky to win the NFA and the Presidential Scholars that year that Hale, his last year of being a judge, certainly. But I wouldn't have bumped into Hale if I hadn't spent my entire senior year locked in my room. So I paid then instead of paying later. So anyway, that's basically my start. there's a couple of things. If you guys are interested, you can ask me questions, and maybe I'll make like little YouTube videos that sort of hone in on the other stuff. I also recently found the Tupperware filled with VHSs that are my only copies. I don't have them on DVD or anything. My only copies of my films I made in high school, and I'm gonna try to get them digitized. I'll bring them to a company that can make a DVD copy and see what you guys think. Normally people don't release these things, and they're like, because they're CG, and it's not just like early attempts at filmmaking. It's early CG. It's I feel like they are ultra embarrassing. It's not like Pete Docter's CalArts film with the little girl and the old man. That was obviously a precursor to like Up. I mean, you can see Up in his CalArts film. I mean, because the tools for 2D animation haven't changed, so you're gonna look at mine, you're gonna be like, man, these are awful. Whatever. It's all in good fun. So that's my start. So I don't know if you get anything from that. I've been sitting on that question for years. I just thought now would be a good time to maybe give people a shot in the arm and say, get to work and do good work. Okay? Hope you enjoyed that. I did. I'm Kenny Roy. Good luck with your animation as always. Rock on.